Well, hello again from here inside the Emirates Stadium. Now, usually this season, when I come to reflect on matches between Newcastle and Arsenal, it is reflecting on a Newcastle victory. Not this time, 3 times they've beaten them, but they didn't here today. And this was a stat which blew my mind when I was given it during the game. Arsenal's goal there, the winner, Declan Rice, and what a wonderful goal it was at that end, fair play to him. It was Arsenal's 53rd shot against Newcastle this season, and the first time they've scored. That really is quite something and just shows the level of dominance Newcastle have had over Arsenal this year. I wrote in my Daily Mail match report, it wasn't so much a football match for them, it was more an exorcism. And for the first half, it looked like a recurring nightmare for Arsenal, and it really was. I think while we say that about Arsenal putting those ghosts to rest against Newcastle, I think it'll be Newcastle who look back on this one with a real haunted feel if next weekend doesn't go the way it should go in the beat Everton and stay in the top 5 and get Champions League football. This, for me today, was the one that got away, certainly based on the first half performance. Now, the second half performance wasn't as good. Again, I put in my match report, first half with a swagger, second half with a stagger. And I don't know if you follow my WhatsApp channel, I'll put a link in the description below the line. It's good. Voice notes, pictures, news, everything. I said in the voice note I delivered at half time that the second half wouldn't play out the way the first had. Football just doesn't work like that. I said to George Colligan, who was sat behind me, I said, they'll lose this in the second half. You just know the way the narrative is shaping and given that 15 minutes to reflect, because you're caught up in it in those opening 45 minutes. Newcastle have played well, they've been the better team, they've had the chances, David Raya and the goal there has been fantastic for Arsenal. But then you just come to reflect at half time and you absorb and you take it all in and you realise there is no Alexander Isak. You realise there is a reason they haven't scored. You realise there is a reason balls have been flashing through the box without any takers. You realise there is a reason they haven't had any conviction at all in terms of the finish. And goodness, Tino Livramento went through on goal just before half time and stopped and ran back into position. It was absolutely bizarre. Is that just the impact, the effect Isak has had? Now, this is 4 games without Isak this season in the Premier League. They've scored 1 goal in that time, and that was a penalty. So just when it come to reflect, during the break, I came into the second half thinking Arsenal will not be as bad as they've been in the first half when they were sleepwalking. They're going to snap from that slumber. They will improve. And I just thought Newcastle had left a lot out there in the first half when they were admittedly good and they weren't terrible in the second half. But was I ever really convinced they were going to come back into it and score a goal? No, I wasn't, not at all. And they should look back on that first half with regret. Now, Newcastle, in the 3 previous victories over Arsenal, they've come out like the wind, really, and they've blown Arsenal away. I actually thought for the first 5 minutes, they started quite slowly. It seems as if they were going to sit in and just let Arsenal play in front of them. It was a different start in that regard. But then, it's Arsenal who give Newcastle the blower in the end. David Raya plays the ball into midfield. He's looking, he actually finds Newcastle's midfield straight to Sandro Tonali. I think this is about the 7th or 8th minute. And from that, the direction of the first half changed. Tonali plays it back into the box. It eventually falls for Bruno Guimaraes. And I thought Bruno was very good today, and we'll get to the merit stars. But the finish, it was shovelled really, and we know this about Bruno. He hasn't got the cleanest connection. In that scenario there, he either should put it back across his body into the top corner or into the other top corner. He puts it the one place he shouldn't. And I honestly feel if Newcastle get that goal during the opening 10-15 minutes, they would have gone on to get a second, a third. They would have been the winners here today. Where we are in the press box, which is here, you're right amongst the home fans. They were touchy. They were on their players' backs. He's ran through. I'll give you the filtered versions. He's ran through without anyone effing challenging him. Does anyone effing care? That was the level of angst there was here. Just needed the Newcastle goal really to hammer home that dominance in it. And it didn't come. And let's go through some of those chances. Bruno's was the first. Harvey Barnes then has a run. It's a deflected shot, and David Raya, he didn't just make up for that early error. He toned for it and then some. Come off time, it was his teammates who were indebted to him, really. A brilliant save just around the post. I've mentioned Tino going through on goal. And then 2 brilliant Raya stops from the corner, from Dan Burn's header and Sven Botman's prod. There was then another one where Dan Burn plays a lovely ball down the wing and Anthony Gordon puts it across the face of goal. And Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall then in front of us, they looked at each other. It was almost to say, where was Callum Wilson in that instance? Now, nothing really fell for Wilson today, and I know there'll be a big focus on his performance. Now, I spoke to Kevin Nolan about this at half time, and Nolan is a former player, so we'll see to his better judgment. And he said when you haven't played as a footballer, you just don't have that rhythm really. And Callum today, I've got all the time in the world from. I made a case before the game. I thought he'd look bright in that cameo down at Brighton, and given that Isak has come off it a little bit in recent weeks, has looked as if he is carrying that groin issue. It's always better to go into a match with Isak, but I can still make a case to be optimistic with Wilson coming in. It didn't really play out like that. He did look like a player in need of games. He doesn't have games. He had game to come in today and make that impact and make that difference. And he didn't. He couldn't. He did look a little, 1-2 yards short of his best. And the thing with Callum now is we don't know what his best is. I'm not going to return judgment because, he would need a run in the team. But when Newcastle needed him to come in today and hit the ground running, he couldn't really do that. And that absence of Isak, well, it showed come half time. It really did. And as I said, I entered into the second half and I thought it was going to play out with an Arsenal victory. And the goal, it's sloppy. It's really sloppy from Anthony Gordon. And it almost characterised much of what went for Newcastle in the second half. Wonderful finish from Declan Rice. But then 5 minutes later, again, a little passage that was symptomatic of Newcastle's play in that second half. Tino Livramento does brilliantly to recycle the ball, plays it back to Gordon, and they've got a real position of promise in Arsenal's penalty area. And between the two of them, they just made a real mess of it. And I made a point of noting at the time, that just that captured the way Newcastle were going in the final third. They weren't ruthless, they weren't clinical, they didn't have that killer touch about them, and that was because of the absence of Isak. When he's not there, it seems to spread, and there's an indifference and a real loss of belief in the forward players. Now, what did Eddie Howe do to change that? Well, he brought on Lasula. He ran about, it didn't really happen for them. And as I said, I was writing that Daily Mail match report, and at no point did I think really that Newcastle were going to get back into it. Now, when we came to speak to Eddie afterwards, he had the look and the feel of a man who was trapped in purgatory, really, not knowing which way the next 7 days are going to go. Will it be heaven or will it be hell? Dropping out of that top 5 now, given everything that has gone before this season, to put themselves in this position would be a massive, huge, bitter disappointment. Of course it would. And while Alexander Isak's feet have fired them into this position, they really need his groin to hold out and recover to keep them there, because there is that danger, that slight worry, that fear that if they go into next week without Isak, will that just be there in the back of their head, that run of not winning, of not scoring when he isn't in the team? Now, what did Eddie Howe say? I think, known to play Eddie Howe injury bingo, that it sounded relatively positive. He was fit enough and well enough, they thought, to travel with the squad. The stiffness he felt in his groin after training yesterday, that didn't ease. He was sent for a precautionary scan. Doesn't seem as if the scan has showed any bad damage. That certainly wasn't what it detected. And Eddie said that the next few days are going to be crucial, really, in determining whether he is available for next weekend. He was also asked the question by an Arsenal covering journalist, what colour jersey will Alexander Isak be in next season? Well, perhaps those two events are actually dependent on each other. Newcastle need Isak to be there next Sunday to make sure, in many ways, he's there next season. Because with him in the team, I think they'll just go and they'll beat Everton. They'll get those 3 points they need. And if they are in the Champions League, as I touched on in the preview video, that then allows them to go and do what they need to do with regards to his contract, with regards bringing in those other players to signal that ambition, to signal that intent, to keep the top stars at Newcastle and then build on it next season. So, wow, yeah, this just feels like we're in a little bit of a holding pattern here today. Even if Newcastle had gone and scored a goal at the end, the draw really was academic. It was win or bust. That is why I admired the way they went after that victory in the first half. And they should have had it. That is the regret coming away from here. They played well. I thought they played with real purpose, with control. Bruno and Tonali in the midfield were fantastic. Again, is a 2 in there. And they deserved a win on the opening 45 minutes. They didn't deserve that on the second 45. Now, the Emirates Stars, I really did wrestle actually with whether to give a 3 today, just because I was so disappointed by what played out in the second half on the back of such a good first half. But I thought one player in particular did deserve the 3, so we'll get to them. And in ascending order, well, the one that goes to Tino Livramento. Now, I was disappointed with Tino in terms of that end product, but it was another good performance in terms of up against Bukayo. Saka, who he didn't really give an inch to at all. And I thought he really put Arsenal on the back foot, and he, as much as anyone during the first half, dragged Newcastle forward and put them into Arsenal's final third, even if that final little touch, that ball, that shot, that conversion was missing. So it's 1 for Tino Livramento. 2 goes to Dan Burn, just another solid, brave, big performance at the heart of the defence. And Arsenal didn't really trouble Newcastle much at all, did they? You know, bar Rice's goal, which is a wonder goal. Nick Pope has made that one fantastic save, and I thought a lot of Newcastle holding firm was just because Dan Burns' brilliant form continued. And the 3, well, they go to Bruno Guimaraes. From the off, really, he just seemed intent on taking the game by the scruff of the neck, and that's one criticism I've had of Bruno in recent weeks when his team have needed him. Certainly the match against Chelsea, I think I wrote in my copy and said on the video he was on the missing list a little bit until he popped up with the late deflected goal at the end. That was different today. He really seized responsibility. Every time you looked out, he seemed to be on the ball in the middle of the park, and he was doing things with it as well this time. He was threading the little passes between the lines. He was playing it out wide. He was trying to then get on the end of things. The first half finished the one early on, you know. It's not his strong suit, is it? He should have been better with that. But even then, in the second half, when they lost their way a little bit, I still thought Bruno was the one who was dragging them forward and trying to make things happen. So Bruno Guimaraes, 3 stars. And they're going to need him to be at that level again next week. They're going to need Sandro Tonali to step up. Anthony Gordon knows them. The mistake for the goal was poor, really. He didn't bust a gut enough to go and then win it back. For me, I was surprised that actually is a player I've got all the time in the world for character-wise, but he didn't cover himself in glory then. He owes Newcastle next week. Can Harvey Barnes, Jacob Murphy, can they pick it up again and show that threat and that output in terms of goals and assists that they've shown of late if Alexander Isak doesn't make it? They're going to have to, you know, this now, next week at Everton. It's almost like you just want to put this one to bed. I feel like Eddie Howe, myself, stuck in purgatory. I can't really reflect on this for too long. It was what it was in the end. First half good, second half not so good, but move on. There was enough from it to be encouraged. It's not an inquest performance where they've got to spend a week picking over the bones of it. Just go again, pick themselves up from a disappointing result. They've got more than enough to beat Everton, even without Alexander Isak. Let's hope he is there. Absolutely, but they should still go and do it. Everton, for me, their party was today, that final game at Goodison Park. Newcastle's party, Newcastle's finale, that's next Sunday. It's St James's, and everything now just points towards that. Nothing less than a win will do. And wow, what a day it promises to be. In the meantime, comment below the line. Where did it go wrong today? Did I get the stars right? Have I missed anybody out? Is there anyone's performance that really disappointed you? Could Eddie Howe have done anything differently? Let me know. Let us have some debate below the line on today's game, and then throw it forward to next week as well, because I just can't stop thinking about what awaits next Sunday at St James's. I'll be there. Thank you so much for watching this one, guys. One last little scan of the Emirates. Yeah. Hit like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you again at the end of the week. Okay, take care. Goodbye.